Let's speak to Rob McKenzie from the Road Haulage Association. It's been a terrible day, hasn't it, in Dover for those lorry drivers, Rod?
It has, James. It's absolutely miserable. We all know it's pretty rubbish being stuck in a traffic jam, especially one of those Cornish traffic jams you get in August. But when you can't get out of it and there's no end in sight, then it's even more miserable. And with a lack of toilet facilities, eating, we hear that Kent County Council offered them one cereal bar to eat per driver. I mean, it's just awful.
But I don't think anyone was prepared for this. We were hearing that there was going to be some contingency in place for when Brexit happened and we might see this scenario. Is the lorry park open at Kent? Has that been operating or was it not ready?
Well, it hasn't been used yet. At the moment, the traffic is still stacked on the M20 and the approaches. Most of the hauliers and lorry drivers have heeded the calls to stay away from Kent today, and they've done a good job on that. So we're talking about a few hundred lorries rather than the potential many thousands that are parked up effectively on the motorway.
We saw some distressed tweets from several haulage companies last night when the news was breaking late on, and there was one Scottish company that transports fresh fish down to Dover, and they were saying, well, what do we do? We got millions of pounds worth of stock on the way to the port for one of the busiest weeks of the year for exporting these things. There must be many stories of haulage companies not knowing what's happening.
Exactly, and it's heartbreaking, isn't it? Because actually the French love their fish. They love their Scottish shellfish, and they're not going to get it. And they're not going to get it because their government has quite, against any logic, imposed a 48-hour blockade. Now, I'll try and explain what I'm saying by no logic. Lorry drivers have an infection rate from COVID of between 2 or 3%. They are one of the lowest occupations in terms of infection. And that is because they sit in a cab alone, they eat in a cab alone, and they sleep in a cab alone. So actually, letting them pass freely from A to B is not a vector of disease, as the French seem to imagine, or the French government seem to imagine. Nothing could be further from the truth. Actually, parking them up on the motorway so they can then wander around and form small groups is far less logical in terms of preventing disease.
There's some suggestions coming in from France to say that they would want COVID tests for truckers or no trade. Do you think that will be the solution that will be announced in this press conference at 5 o'clock? Do you think there is a solution to this?
Well, let's hope there is a solution. The simple solution is just to lift this daft idea. Listen, if they start testing all the drivers, that is really difficult because the tests, unless they're the really, really rapid tests, which are quite unreliable, take 24 hours to come back. So you're not going to be able to ensure a free flow. And most of these drivers are Eastern European anyway. They're not Brits, which is, again, a bit puzzling why the French are punishing them. I just don't see it working as a piece of logistical common sense.
There are many haulage companies in Cornwall. Some of them are actually quite small businesses, on the smaller side. They haven't got fleets of lorries. They're just independent people doing this for a living. What would you say to them, Rod? Where can they get advice at this time?
Well, I think obviously the best thing is to follow the news, and we've got a news conference coming up. But those hauliers have my full support and our full support in what they're going through. It's a very tough time. Logistics companies are incredibly resilient and they're incredibly resourceful. And they will be working on business plans and contingency plans, which they're so good at. They shouldn't have to do this. It's very, very unfair. And what the French government have done defies belief, frankly, and it looks very political. It looks like it's just connected with the Brexit talks and another piece of leverage over the Brexit talks. It's very unpleasant, but it's actually ordinary French people and Brits who are being affected by this, and lorry drivers from Eastern Europe. So if they're trying to target the British government, it's not a clever way of doing it.
You think this is a warning shot from the French, a sort of, a bit of Brexit banter going on, just sort of testing us ahead of what might be to come?
Well, we know the French are most have the biggest problem with the Brexit talks, and it's all about fish. And it's hard to see any logical reason. Like I say, if there was any proof that lorry drivers transmitted COVID, you could see some logic, but there is no logic, as I've explained. This is not like an airline passenger with COVID getting on board a busy flight and potentially infecting 300 people. This is a lorry driver delivering the things we need in time to us in our shops, and, by the way, to the French as well, because it works both ways. So it is really illogical, this, and it's very unfair, and it's a very bad time of year to do it.
Rod, thank you for your time. Rod McKenzie from the Road Haulage Association.